If you are a fan of double standards, sit down, buckle up, and set your DVR. You're going to want to save this one. We're going to blow open the media's double standard and show you how they're purposely skewing stories and blaming things on others that they're guilty of, too. Plus, fallout from a primary that was very frustrating. Why are voters so mad, and what went wrong in Wisconsin? And we're going to get a temperature check from a doctor who heads the Doctors for Disaster Preparedness. Spicer & Company starting right now. The number of cases of coronavirus has now topped 400,000 in the United States, and the blame game has continued extensively. I'm Sean Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, some media outlets and Democrats continue to blame the Trump administration for their handling of the response to the coronavirus.
But as the pandemic unfolded, some government officials, many of them now blaming the administration, downplayed the impact of the virus. Take a listen.
This should not stop you from going about your life, should not stop you from going to Chinatown and going out to eat. I'm going to do that today myself.
Come to Chinatown. Here we are. We're, again, careful, safe, and come join us.
There is no concern at this time for coronavirus in our region.
The Department of Sanitation is ready for Mardi Gras 2020.
There's really no need to panic and to avoid activities that we always do as New Yorkers. We are a hardy people.
Americans do not need to panic. What I would suggest, however, is that Americans take this as a wake-up call for seasonal flu.
There's very little threat here. This disease, even if you were to get it, basically acts like a common cold or flu. And transmission is not that easy. I think there's been a misperception that coronavirus hangs in the air waiting to catch you. No, it takes direct person-to-person contact.
Oh, and if you thought that that was just limited to government officials, hang on. The mainstream media has also piled on the president and called his administration, saying they were, quote, slow to react. But the media themselves also downplayed the virus early on before the panic set in. Take a listen.
There's an important context we need to keep this in, and that is that the flu is more deadly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is one of the ironies, I think, that always comes up with this. Take a look at the numbers.
I want to give you some important context. So far, we know of fewer than 24 deaths from coronavirus in the U.S. By comparison, between 12 and 60,000 Americans die of the flu in an average year.
And while there's a lot of fear over this coronavirus, you know, the flu is already widespread in the U.S. and it really is much more deadly, is it not?
Americans do not need to panic. The Chinese are already panicking, as they should.
The risk in this country is still deemed to be low. Okay, that is the risk. That's one of the reasons why the CDC does not recommend that we wear masks.
All right, we have a lot to break down, clearly. So we welcome Joe Concha, the media reporter for The Hill, and Steve Cortes, host of The Steve Cortes Show, and the senior advisor and spokesperson for America First Action Super PAC. Guys, thanks for coming on.
Hello. All right, gentlemen. So it's government leaders and folks in the media. They all pile on President Trump and this administration, saying that these guys have got it wrong. They were caught sleeping. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's their fault. The president didn't do enough, blah, blah, blah. But over and over again, we see the government officials who are so quick to point the finger themselves were late to the game, number one. Number two, so many of these outlets that night after night talk about how the president has not done a good job, has been downplaying it, themselves were to blame. And so I think, look, I'm one of these people that does not get into this blame game. I think the bottom line is this thing has been something completely novel that nobody could have totally understood what was coming our way. But the bottom line is, if these guys on the left and in the media are going to point the fingers at the president and the right, they need to be held accountable as well. Joe Concha, you cover the media. Am I off base?
I've been studying this now, Sean, for a couple of weeks now in terms of start to finish, in terms of this epidemic that became a pandemic that is now totally dwarfing every news story, obviously, for good reason in this country. Here's what I know. January 14th, World Health Organization put out a tweet saying that there was no bat to human transmission that could happen with this virus. January 21st, and this isn't a gotcha in any way. I'm just pointing out a timeline. Dr. Anthony Fauci on Newsmax to Greg Kelly said that the U.S. and its citizens should not be concerned about this. A week later, the president still put his travel ban on China. Later, he did that in Europe. And I know from the media, in terms of looking at February, there were 3 debates, Democratic debates, millions of people watching on CBS, ABC, NBC. And one question out of hours and hours and hundreds of questions was asked about coronavirus, nor did any of the Democratic candidates broach it themselves to say what they would do outside of Michael Bloomberg, who got shut down, by the way, by Gayle King when he tried to do it. So when I add up all of this, this was a failure to a certain extent on every level, whether we're talking about the federal level, the local level, particularly here in New York with Bill de Blasio telling people to go out and do what they have to do. And I look at California, and you got to give Governor Gavin Newsom extraordinary credit because they only have a death toll in the low hundreds, despite having 4 cities and 40 million people there. So there's a lot of blame that you could have going around, but I'll leave you with this because I don't want to eat up too much time. I think I already have. All right. There are models that show that just 5 days ago, 93,000 people would die in this country from coronavirus. It got lowered to 81,000 2 days ago. Today, that model, IHME, is at 60,000. 30% gone. Why is that? That's what our media should be talking about. Why are those levels coming down so fast, so quickly, and what's causing that to happen?
All good points. Steve Cortes, the word Wuhan virus, that's horrible. You cannot use it. Chinese virus, cannot use it. It's insulting. It's racist, right? Well, hold on. Before you answer, let me show you this.
The Wuhan coronavirus. What more can you tell us about the similarities or differences between SARS and the Wuhan coronavirus?
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus in China.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
From the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
Fears continue to grow over the outbreak of the Wuhan coronavirus.
Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
The Wuhan coronavirus.
We have new information about how the Wuhan coronavirus is spread.
Now, Steve, before you answer, I didn't want you to think that was limited to just all of the same CNN and MSNBC and CNBC folks who are pointing the president at the finger at the president for saying this, because let me just show you a quick thing of what the Washington Post said. Take a look at this. This is the Washington Post on January 27th. And correct me if I'm wrong, but above the fold, in the top right corner, and for those of you who don't read newspapers anymore, that's the important part, it says Chinese virus infects and death toll spikes. So I don't understand, Steve Cortes. I thought this was bad and racist and horrible, right?
Well, Sean, look, when it comes to media and liberals, I would say in general, if it weren't for double standards, they would have no standards at all. And in this case, you're exactly right. When it comes to affixing or accusing the president of racism, when he uses a phrase that they all readily use themselves, a phrase, by the way, which is simply descriptive. It's not even a pejorative in its essence. I prefer actually to use CCP virus, by the way, because I really want to tag the Chinese Communist Party as the menace that they are for literally infecting the world and crashing the global economy. But regardless of which phrase we use, your point is very well taken, that the media here is incredibly duplicitous. And at a time that we need them the most, information is critical in fighting this virus and in the recovery that is to come economically. We really need more than ever a vigilant and objective press in this country. And we don't have it. And that's a shame.
Yeah, that's right. And guys, I want to read you some more headlines just to continue to show the impact that the media really has tried to take and make this bias. So hold with me because there's quite a few here. Vox on January 31st, this is a day after the World Health Organization declared this emergency, said, is this going to be a deadly pandemic? Nope, it's not. And then Washington Post, January 31st, how our brains make the coronavirus seem scarier than it actually is. Washington Post on January 31st, get a grip, America. The flu is a much bigger threat than the coronavirus. And it goes on. The Washington Post on February 3rd says, why should we be wary an aggressive government response to the coronavirus? And obviously, this is after the president had put border restrictions on China. And then the New York Times, February 18th, in Europe, fear spreads faster than the coronavirus itself. And so obviously, we didn't have as much information then. But my question is, why does the media have to continue to point fingers? And you guys are saying this, but why do they have to push blame instead of doing the research and saying, hey, we didn't know this then, but look what we know now. We were wrong ourselves.
Right. Lindsay, listen, I think it's a critical point, and I think the answer is clear. It's Donald Trump. The reason the media was too complacent about the risks in late January and February was because our president was very presciently taking action to try to stave off the virus, to try to protect Americans, including most especially the travel ban, the travel restrictions on China. However, the media has now swung completely from complacency to absolute paranoia at this point, and I think both extremes are wrong. The reason they now want there to be excessive fear is that they believe it will harm the president's reelection chances. So I really believe, unfortunately, I wish this weren't the case, but I think, my Latin teacher, Sister Mary Gale, back in high school, she taught us the phrase that all roads lead to Rome in the classical world. Well, in the media landscape of 2020, all roads lead to Donald Trump. And whatever they believe can harm Trump is what they will pursue.
Good Catholic reference during Holy Week there, Steve. Joe Concha, January 21st, you mentioned it. Anthony Fauci, who I love, I think he's an unbelievable public servant, and I hope he gets the White House medal when he's done for this. But you called it out. Let's listen to what he said here on Newsmax with Greg Kelly.
This is not a major threat for the people in the United States, and this is not something that the citizens of the United States right now should be worried about.
Joe, I only got 30 seconds left, but this is not to point fingers. I get it. Things have evolved. We're learning more every day. But if you've got this guy like Fauci out there who everybody praises in the mainstream media and he didn't fully understand it, then why is it fair to blame Trump?
Anthony Fauci, Sean, was going on the information that he had from two places, China and the World Health Organization. And obviously China lied about this, and obviously the World Health Organization was doing its bidding for China. So I can't really blame Fauci all that much there. But yeah, look, the reflex is always to blame the president. If he says, take this anti-malaria drug because I think it would work, and then we see anecdotal evidence from doctors across the country saying, yeah, this appears to be having some positive impact. We don't know to the extent of that. But again, the reflex is, okay, you know what? Trump says to take it, therefore don't take it. That's one small example in many examples, and we're going to see this from now until Election Day. But if death tolls stay lower and that trend keeps going down, guys, and that thing ends up being 30,000, 40,000 deaths, which is horrible. That is a flu season. And that's something that when you compare it to 2.2 million or 200,000, that would be a victory for the American people because they did what they were supposed to do in terms of social distancing and listening to the CDC and the administration. So I'll leave it there. Sean, I definitely went over 30 seconds.
That's a great point, though, because I think if Trump comes under the expectation, somehow they will still find a reason to blame him, even if he does everything better than the curve suggested. Great points, gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Coming up, though, Middle America had been spared the brunt of the COVID-19 impact, but that has all changed now.
Plus, why have Black Americans been particularly hard hit by the pandemic? The answers are next. Stick around.